This segment is entitled Investors and Retirement Planning. This is probably my favorite section because at 61 years old I can speak from experience and I can tell you so many stories about different options that people have had over the years. But my segment will start with how many of you have ever given any thought to how much money you need to have in your retirement account before you retire? There's some great commercials on TV that try and make a 30-second commercial slap you in the face and go, oh my God. But the reality is, for the average family that makes $50,000, $80,000, $100,000 a year now, in order to live in the same lifestyle that you live now, you need to have $1.5 million to $2 million in your retirement account. So let's do the math. If you have $2 million in the account, making 5% a year, okay, you will want to live off the 5% a year. So math people, how much is 5% of 2 million? The answer is 100,000. Out of the 100,000, you have to pay income taxes. Math people, what's income taxes on 100,000? Answer, about 30,000. So you're going to net $70,000. 70,000 divided by 12 is $6,000 a month. You'll also have Social Security, so you'll be living on $6,000 a month plus Social Security if you have $2 million in the bank, making 5%. So now I propose to you, how are you going to get there? The days of working at a job where you get a pension and you contribute to the retirement fund are almost over. Unless you're over 55 or 60, I propose that you're probably doing a 401 or an IRA at your place of employment, and let's analyze that. For the average person that makes $75,000 a year, they're probably putting, I'm just going to pick a number, $5,000 in their 401 per year, and the company's matching it with another $5,000 if you're lucky. All right, so that's $10,000 a year. Okay? Let's say you're both working and it's $20,000 a year that you're putting into your 401. In 10 years you have how much? 200,000 plus any interest that it may have earned. In 20 years you have how much? 400,000 plus any interest that you've earned. If you're 35 plus 20 is 55, let's go another 10 years. So 200,000, 200,000, 200,000 is 30 years. You have 600,000 plus some interest, let's call it 700,000, okay? It's not 2 million. If you're doing extremely well, you have 700,000 in retirement, okay? Not 2 million. So let's go backwards and say you have 700,000 because you were studious and emphatic that you would put that money in the 401 and never touch it, okay? And both your employers contributed to your 401 for 30 years. 700,000 at 5% is how much? 35,000 a year. 35,000 is taxed, but at a lower rate, so let's call it 30,000. 30,000 divided by 12 months is how much? $2,500 a month. So now instead of having $6,000 a month, you have $2,500 a month 30 years from now, plus your Social Security. Are you going to be able to retire and live on $3,000 or $4,000 a month 30 years from now? I don't think so. My biggest fear in life right now is that young people are so wrapped up in what they do with their money today that they don't think about 30 years from now. And here I am sitting here telling you 30 years goes by like this. It goes by, and you'll be getting ready to retire with $250,000 in your retirement account and hopefully a house that's all paid for. and you are not going to be able to retire with $250,000 in the bank. So, if you perceive this to be a problem in your life, the next step is to seek a solution. If you don't perceive this to be a problem in your life, then you might as well turn the TV off right now, because you will not listen to my suggested solutions. But if you're staying on the line here, here's my suggestions. The only way that you're going to get close to that number is through real estate. I just don't see it happening in the stock market. In the last 30 years, I've seen the stock market go from 1,000 to 17,000. But in that time, it went up, it went down, people lost fortunes, it went up, it went down, people lost half their retirement money because it was in the stock market. Now, maybe you understand the stock market better than I do, but for the average person, I'll ask a young couple today, do you do a 401 or retirement contribution? And often they say, oh yes, of course, yes. And my next question is, how much? And most of them don't even know the answer, but if they do know the answer, it's something around 5% of their income. So let's call it 5,000. My next question is, what's the name of the guy that manages your 401 or your IRA account at work? I have never in my life had a client, a buyer, or a person that I was working with, know the name of the guy who manages their retirement account. So let me get this straight. You're putting the financial future of you and your family in the hands of some financial advisor that your company picked to manage your retirement funds, and you don't even know the guy's name. My next question is, what if he does a bad job? Can you sue him? Can you go after him for the money? Answer? No, you can't. You have no recourse. You lost it. And it's your fault because you didn't even pay attention to who's managing your money. Now, another solution is when you buy a piece of real estate and you live in it, you put a small portion down and you let the bank finance the rest. That's called leverage. That's called financing. That's called using other people's money. One of the most famous people in our country that did this time and again is a guy named Donald Trump. Donald Trump has gone bankrupt 3 times in his career, and he's built back up his fortune to where he's a billionaire again, using other people's money, i.e. the bank's money. So, my solution to you getting to that number for retirement is to buy a single family home and live in it for 1 to 2 to 3 years. You get to buy it for as little as 3 or 5% down, and you let the bank finance 95%. Let me back up for a half a second. Let's say you buy a $200,000 house with 5% down, $10,000. And let's say your brother takes his $200,000 that he has in his stock market, and he buys stock for $200,000. Okay? Let's say both investments go up 3% next year. Okay? My question is, your brother in the stock market made 3% on $200,000 or $6,000. You made 3% of $200,000 on your house, which is $6,000, on your investment of $10,000. So if you made $6,000 on your $10,000, what percent is that? It's way more than 3%. So let's play this out over 10 years, okay? After the second or the third year, you might find that you are ready and you are able to buy another home. I get called to people's houses all the time. Hey Paul, we want to sell the first house so that we can buy the newer, bigger, nicer house now that we're doing better. We have this conversation, and 80% of the time they listen to me and they keep the first house and they rent it out. And they buy the second house with 5% down, okay? And use the bank's money, okay? Now, the rental on the first house is paying the mortgage on the first house, right? While you're living in the second house with 5% down, paying probably a little bit more than you were on the first house because you got a nicer house. Now you have how many tax deductions? When you bought one house, you had one tax deduction. When you buy a second house, you now have two tax deductions. However, the first house becomes a rental property, an investment property, and the tax deductions actually double from what they were when you were living in it. So if you want to, in simple terms, when you had one house, you had one tax deduction. When you bought the second house, you now have one tax deduction on the second house, and you have two tax deductions on the first house. So you now have three tax deductions, which means what? You get more money back on your income taxes because you're now an owner and an investor. Now, 10 years goes by, and you have two houses that are going up at 3 or 4% a year. You buy the third house, and you rent out the second house. Think about it. The bank will let you do this because you now have history that the rental income covered the debt on the first house. You'll have to qualify for the third house with the mortgage still on the second house, but a year later when that house rents out and you have a history, you'll realize it was easy to do. So, let's say you buy a $200,000, a $300,000, and a $400,000 house over the next 10 years. And you follow my simple plan of 4% a year for 30 years. In 30 years, your 200 will double, your 300 will double, and your 400 will double. Okay, so 200 is 800, 300 is $1.6 million, $1.2 million, and the 400 is $1.6 million. $1.6 million and $1.2 million is $2.8 million, and 800 is $3.6 million. What was the number that we were looking for at the beginning? $2 million. Now you have $3.8 million in real estate, and two of them are probably paid for by now from the renters who paid your mortgage for the last 30 years. I can't think of another way to get to that number that you need to retire than to follow a plan something like that. And what you'll find is, as time goes by, it gets easier to buy these rental properties when you realize how easy it is to rent them out. Because unfortunately, there's a lot of people in the world that A, have bad credit, B, can't see far enough out to save enough money to buy, to have a down payment to buy, so they rent. C, they have no vision. D, they're not worried about their retirement future, they're worried about now instead of later, so they keep renting. The landlords of the world are just, unfortunately for the tenants, taking advantage of the tenants, and they're insistent on paying rent instead of a house payment. And I have seen that trend change, where the demand for rentals is greater than the supply of rentals in several areas around South Orlando. So my suggestion as an investor is that you follow that plan. I'd be glad to help you discuss the plan, the risks, the rewards in more detail if you're ready and you're willing and you want to discuss it. I look forward to helping you in the future. This is the Real Estate Coach, Paul.